Verse of the day. Today's verse of the day is going to be about trusting in God and remembering what He has done for you. So let's get into it. For today's verse of the day, we're going to bounce around a bit. We're going to start in the New Testament and jump way back to the Old Testament with King Hezekiah. So today's verse of the day comes out of Colossians 2. It's verse 8, and it says, "See to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition and the elemental spiritual forces of this world rather than on Christ." So, when we jump back to the Old Testament, there's this character by the name of Hezekiah who found himself with this dilemma. Hezekiah, it says in chapter 18 of 2 Kings, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He tore down false idols, and he rebelled against the king of Assyria, to which the king of Assyria sent out messengers and a great army against Hezekiah. And the message he sent was of blasphemy against God, and it was in opposition to the truth of who God was and what God has done and would do for his people. So when faced with deception, Hezekiah did what the word tells us to do in Proverbs 3:5-6, which says, "Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." So Hezekiah turns to God in prayer and also through the prophet Isaiah, trusting in God and surrendering his will and this impossible circumstance over to the one whom he knows makes the impossible possible, the Lord our God, which then leads to, in chapter 19, the greatest victory of Hezekiah's life, when the Lord sends out an angel to slay 185,000 men in the Assyrian camp. Now, you would think that a victory like this, one so clearly miraculous, would be enough to sustain one's faith, but Hezekiah does something wholly human in his own doubt. Later on in life, once again, later when Hezekiah falls ill and is facing death requires the miraculous from God, after praying for and receiving a word of healing, he still asks for a sign. Now, I know what you're thinking. Clearly, God could have simply said that his word is sufficient and just left it at that. But instead, he demonstrated his own love in the provision of his miraculous grace that would transform Hezekiah, taking him from death to life. Does this sound a little familiar of a character from the New Testament? Christ, perhaps. We have a tendency, though, ourselves to be swayed by circumstance and situation, to allow our faith to be shaken by the deceptive nature and the whispers of the enemy, instead of standing firmly on the foundations of God's word, which we must actively and intentionally apply to every circumstance and situation, especially to those that oppose themselves to the knowledge of God. The choice that you have is to take captive that which opposes itself to the knowledge of God, or be taken captive by it. There is no middle ground here. But this requires that you surrender yourself to the way, to the truth, and the life that is Jesus Christ. This is where the miraculous begins in your life. And so I encourage you, surrender your will to his. Allow your blinded eyes to be open to the fact that God's hand has been in your life, that his will has been exacted even though you aren't aligning yours with his. How much more provision will God allow in your life if you are aligning your will with his? So again, I encourage you to surrender to his. I hope this has been an encouragement, and I hope this has been edifying for someone. You guys have a good one.